The fall of Ayutthaya and the rise of Bangkok. The destruction of Ayutthaya in 1767 did not simply end a kingdom. It created a question: what would come next? For centuries, Ayutthaya had been the political and cultural center of Siam. Its temples had dominated the skyline. Its royal court had welcomed foreign diplomats. Its merchants had connected the kingdom to distant parts of Asia. But now much of the city lay in ruins. The survivors had to rebuild their lives somewhere else. And they did not have the luxury of waiting. A new political center emerged at Thonburi, on the western side of the Chao Phraya River. The man who established this new kingdom was King Taksin. His story quickly became surrounded by legend. He had been a military commander during the final years of Ayutthaya. After the capital fell, he gathered forces and fought to restore Siamese independence. Within a remarkably short period, he managed to reunify much of the kingdom. But Thonburi would not remain the capital for long. In 1782, political power moved across the river. A new capital was established. Bangkok, the first ruler of the new Chakri dynasty, became King Rama I. And one of his most important goals was to rebuild the institutions and traditions that had been damaged during the destruction of Ayutthaya. The new capital was deliberately designed with Ayutthaya in mind. The river became part of its defensive system. Canals were constructed, walls and fortifications were built, palaces and temples appeared. The Grand Palace became the center of royal power, and within the palace complex, one temple gained extraordinary importance: Wat Phra Kae, the Temple of the Emerald Buddha. The statue inside is not actually made of emerald. It is carved from jadeite, but its importance is enormous. The statue is surrounded by legends. One story claims that it was hidden inside another statue for centuries. According to the legend, lightning struck a temple in Chiang Rai and damaged an ordinary-looking plaster image. When the damaged exterior was removed, a precious green Buddha appeared underneath. The story cannot be confirmed as historical fact, but the statue really did travel through several Southeast Asian kingdoms before reaching Bangkok. Its journey became part of its mythology, and mythology would continue to play an important role in the new capital. Bangkok was not simply a political center. It became a symbolic reconstruction of the Siamese world. The city was filled with temples, monasteries, royal ceremonies, markets, canals, and communities of people who had arrived from different parts of Asia. Chinese immigrants became especially important. Chinese merchants had already played a major role in Ayutthaya. In Bangkok, their influence grew even further. The area that would become Chinatown developed into a major commercial district. Today, Yaowarat is famous for food and nightlife. But beneath the neon signs is a much older story. Families have lived and worked here for generations. Traditional businesses survive beside modern stores. Temples stand close to markets. And the district reflects the enormous influence of Chinese culture on Thailand. Yet Bangkok was changing in another way. The 19th century brought increasing contact with European powers. And this created a dangerous situation. Britain was expanding throughout Asia. The British controlled India. They moved into Burma. They established influence in Malaya. France was expanding into Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. Siam was becoming a kingdom surrounded by empires. The rulers of Bangkok understood the danger. They needed to modernize, but they also needed to avoid becoming a European colony. One of the most fascinating figures in this period was King Mongkut, Rama IV. Before becoming king, he spent almost 3 decades as a Buddhist monk. This gave him an unusual education. He studied Buddhist texts. He learned languages. He became interested in Western science. He communicated with foreign visitors. And when he eventually became king, he was prepared to deal with a rapidly changing world. His reign became associated with diplomacy and modernization. Western visitors were welcomed at the court. Scientific knowledge became increasingly respected. And Siam began adapting institutions to a changing international environment. But the next generation would take modernization even further. King Chulalongkorn, Rama V, became one of the most important rulers in Thai history. He traveled abroad. He observed European institutions. And he introduced reforms at home. The government became more centralized. The administration was reorganized. Modern schools were developed. Railways expanded. Communication systems improved. And the traditional system of labor obligations was gradually transformed. But modernization was not simply about copying Europe. It was a strategy for survival. The message was clear. If Siam looked weak and disorganized, foreign powers might claim that intervention was necessary. If Siam could demonstrate that it was a modern state capable of governing itself, independence became easier to defend. But independence came with a price. Siam lost control over territories that had previously been within its sphere of influence. Borders were redrawn, treaties were signed, and some regions were transferred to European colonial powers. From a modern perspective, these events can be difficult to understand. Why would a kingdom surrender territory? Because the alternative could have been much worse. A complete colonial takeover. Siam had to compromise in order to survive. And somehow, it did. While much of Southeast Asia fell under British or French colonial rule, Siam remained formally independent. That achievement would become one of the defining features of Thai national history. But independence did not mean that the country escaped change. Bangkok continued to transform. The old canals remained, but roads became more important. Traditional buildings stood beside Western-style structures. Steamships appeared on the river. Telegraph lines connected distant regions. And eventually, railways began carrying people across the country. Thailand was entering the modern age. Yet the ancient world had not disappeared. Monks still walked through temple courtyards. Spirit houses stood outside buildings. Farmers continued to work the rice fields. And ancient stories were still being told. The result was a country living between two worlds. One foot in the past, one foot in the future. And nowhere was this contrast more dramatic than in Bangkok. A city where golden temples could stand only minutes away from modern streets. A city where ancient rituals continued beneath an increasingly modern skyline. But beyond the capital, another world was waiting. The mountains, the forests, and the ancient northern kingdom of Lanna. The mountains, temples and mysteries of northern Thailand. If Bangkok is the beating heart of modern Thailand, the north feels like another country. The climate changes, the landscape rises, the roads begin climbing through mountains, and the influence of the ancient Lanna kingdom becomes visible almost everywhere. Northern Thailand is dominated by mountains. Some valleys are surrounded by ridges covered in forest. During the rainy season, clouds settle over the landscape. In the early morning, entire villages can disappear beneath mist. This geography created isolated communities for centuries. It also helped preserve traditions that developed differently from those of central Thailand. The most important city of the north is Chiang Mai. Founded in 1296, Chiang Mai became the capital of the Lanna Kingdom. The city was carefully positioned within a fertile valley. Its old center was surrounded by a moat and defensive walls. Those walls were not simply decorative. Medieval Southeast Asia was a world of political competition. Kingdoms fought for control of cities, trade routes, agricultural land, and people. A strong defensive position could mean the difference between survival and destruction. But Chiang Mai was also a religious center. Temples became symbols of Lanna identity. One of the most famous is Wat Chediluang. Its enormous chedi once towered above the city. An earthquake in the 16th century caused major damage. Yet even today, the remaining structure demonstrates the scale of medieval Chiang Mai. Another temple sits dramatically on the mountain above the city. Wat Phra That Doi Sathip. From the temple grounds, the city spreads across the valley below. The golden chedi at the center of the complex is considered sacred, and surrounding it is one of northern Thailand's most famous legends. According to tradition, a sacred Buddhist relic needed to be placed somewhere important. A white elephant was chosen to carry it. The animal supposedly wandered through the mountains. Eventually, it stopped at the location where the temple now stands. The elephant died there, and the place was considered a sign from the spiritual world. There is no scientific way to prove the legend, but the story became part of the identity of the mountain, and it reveals something important about Thai religious traditions. Sacred places are often connected not only to architecture, but also to stories. A mountain becomes holy because something happened there. A tree becomes sacred because a monk meditated beneath it. A river becomes spiritually significant because generations of people have built rituals around it. Nature and religion become intertwined. This relationship becomes even more fascinating in remote forests. Northern Thailand is home to numerous caves. Some contain Buddhist shrines, others contain ancient archaeological evidence, and many are associated with local legends. One of the strangest stories concerns underground worlds. Traditional Southeast Asian mythology often describes caves as places where humans can encounter supernatural beings. In some stories, a cave is not simply an empty space inside a mountain. It is a doorway, a boundary between the human world and another realm. One legendary creature appears repeatedly in these stories. The naga, the serpent-like being, is associated with water and the supernatural. Naga sculptures often guard temple stairways. Their bodies stretch down the steps as if protecting the sacred space. But the north has other creatures in its folklore. Forest spirits. Mountain guardians, invisible beings said to inhabit particular places. These stories once had practical importance. If a forest was believed to be sacred, people might avoid cutting trees there. If a mountain was considered dangerous, travelers might approach it with caution. Myth could therefore function as a form of environmental protection. Not every legend had to be literally true to influence human behavior. The forests themselves are extraordinary. Doi Inthanon is Thailand's highest mountain. At its summit, the environment is dramatically different from the tropical lowlands. Temperatures can become surprisingly cool. Trees are covered with moss. Clouds move through the forest. Waterfalls cut through the mountains. And the landscape can look almost like another country. The mountain is protected as part of Doi Inthanon National Park. Wildlife includes birds, mammals, reptiles, insects, and countless plant species. The area is particularly important for birdwatchers. But for local people, the mountain has another meaning. Mountains in many Southeast Asian traditions are associated with the spiritual world. They rise above ordinary life. They touch the clouds. They become natural symbols of the heavens. And this symbolism appears in temple architecture. The central tower of a temple can represent Mount Meru, the cosmic mountain described in Buddhist and Hindu traditions. The architecture is therefore not random. A temple can be imagined as a model of the universe. Its central structure represents the cosmic center. The surrounding spaces represent different realms, and the journey toward the central sanctuary becomes symbolic. You are not simply walking through a building. You are moving toward the sacred center. Northern Thailand also contains communities whose cultures developed independently of the major cities. Hill communities have lived in the mountains for generations. Some traditionally practiced shifting cultivation. Others became involved in trade. Many have their own languages, clothing, music, and religious traditions. Their cultures are often simplified in tourist advertising, but their histories are much more complicated. Migration, borders, wars, and changing government policies affected these communities for generations. Some villages were moved. Others adapted to new forms of agriculture. Tourism created new economic opportunities but also new pressures. The question is difficult. How do you preserve a culture without freezing it in the past? A living culture must change, and northern Thailand is changing. Modern roads now connect remote valleys. Smartphones have reached mountain villages. Young people move to cities for education and work. Yet traditions continue. Festivals still bring communities together. Temples remain important, and old stories are still told. One of the most beautiful celebrations is Yipeng. Lanterns rise into the night sky. Hundreds of glowing lights can drift above the city. The sight looks almost magical. But behind the spectacle is a spiritual tradition connected to making merit, releasing misfortune, and expressing hopes for the future. Another festival celebrated across Thailand is Loi Krathong. People place small decorated floats on rivers and waterways. Candles burn on the surface of the water. Some people make wishes. Others symbolically release negative feelings or misfortune. The exact origins of the tradition are debated, but its meaning has evolved over generations. Water once determined survival. Now it also becomes part of ritual. And this brings us back to one of the oldest themes in Thai history. Water connects everything. The mountains send rivers toward the plains. The plains produce rice. The rivers carry goods toward the sea. And the sea connects Thailand to the rest of the world. But there is another Thailand beyond the mountains. A Thailand of limestone cliffs, tropical forests, caves, islands, and enormous underground chambers. And there, the stories become even stranger. The secret world of Thailand's jungles. And island southern Thailand looks almost too beautiful to be real. Limestone mountains rise vertically from the jungle. Turquoise water surrounds islands covered with thick vegetation. Caves disappear into cliffs. Coral reefs stretch beneath the surface. And during the rainy season, waterfalls become powerful rivers. But beneath this beauty is an ecosystem that can be dangerous. The forests are home to snakes, spiders, insects, monkeys, reptiles, and some of Southeast Asia's most unusual plants. One of the most famous is the Rafflesia. It produces one of the largest individual flowers in the world. But it has a strange strategy. The flower smells like rotting meat. To humans, the smell is unpleasant. To flies, it is an invitation. The flies are attracted to the odor and help pollinate the plant. The plant itself is also unusual because it spends most of its life hidden within its host. You can walk through the forest without ever realizing that one of the world's strangest flowers is nearby. Southern Thailand also contains one of the country's most spectacular national parks, Khao Sok. The landscape is dominated by rainforest and limestone formations. The forest is extremely old in geological terms. Massive cliffs rise above the trees, rivers flow through valleys, and in the middle of the park lies Lan Lake. The lake is artificial. It was created after a dam was constructed. When the valley flooded, forests disappeared beneath the water. Only the tops of limestone formations remained above the surface. Today, the result is breathtaking. Tall rock towers rise from the lake like islands from another world. Mist floats between them in the morning. Floating camps sit on the water, and boats move silently between the cliffs. But the creation of the lake also transformed the ecosystem and displaced communities. This is an important reminder. Beautiful landscapes can have complicated histories. Environmental changes always affect someone. The forests of southern Thailand also contain caves. Some are enormous. Others are narrow passages that can only be explored by experienced guides. Caves were important to ancient communities. They provided shelter. They offered protection from weather, and some became sacred spaces. In Buddhist culture, caves are often associated with meditation. A monk seeking solitude could retreat from the noise of the outside world. The darkness itself became symbolic. Away from the distractions of ordinary life, the mind could become quieter. But caves also appear in mythology. Stories about underground kingdoms are common throughout Southeast Asia. And once again, the naga appears. The naga is connected to water, and southern Thailand has no shortage of water. Rivers, lakes, caves, seas. Perhaps this explains why serpent mythology became so powerful. A snake moving through water can disappear without a trace. For ancient people, that alone could seem supernatural. But Thailand's real marine world is no less fascinating. The Andaman Sea contains coral reefs, sea turtles, reef fish, rays, sharks, and enormous whale sharks. The Similan Islands became internationally famous because of their underwater landscapes. Large granite boulders create caves and channels beneath the water. Divers can move between enormous rock formations while schools of fish surround them. But marine ecosystems are fragile. Coral reefs are affected by rising temperatures. Pollution can damage them. Physical contact with coral can destroy living organisms, and to many visitors can place enormous pressure on small islands. This is why some Thai marine parks have introduced seasonal closures and restrictions. The idea is simple. Sometimes the best way to protect paradise is to keep people away from it. But the islands have another history. Some were once isolated. Others were used by fishermen. Some became shelters for pirates. And some have darker stories. Taratau Island, for example, once served as a prison colony. Political prisoners and criminals were sent to the remote island. Its distance from the mainland made escape difficult. The tropical environment created additional dangers: disease, malaria, lack of food, isolation. During the Second World War, the situation became even more complicated. With supplies disrupted, prisoners and guards became involved in piracy according to historical accounts of the period. It is difficult to imagine this history while standing on a modern tropical beach. Tourists see blue water, palm trees, sunlight, but the island remembers something very different. Another famous region is Phanginga Bay. Its limestone islands rise dramatically from the sea. Some are covered in vegetation. Others are almost entirely vertical rock. The formations were created through geological processes that took millions of years. But traditional stories often explain them differently. In folklore, strange islands can become the remains of giants, battlegrounds, petrified creatures, or fragments of ancient kingdoms. These explanations are not scientific, but they show how humans have always tried to understand landscapes. A giant cliff demands a story. A mysterious cave demands a legend. An isolated island becomes a hiding place for treasure, and a glowing light above a river becomes a supernatural sign. Perhaps one of Thailand's most famous mysterious phenomena occurs far to the northeast, along the Mekong. During certain periods, glowing balls of light have been reported rising from the river. They are known as naga fireballs. Some local traditions connect them to the naga. Scientists have proposed various natural explanations, but the phenomenon remains controversial, and every year, people gather hoping to see the lights. This is the strange balance at the heart of Thailand: science and mythology, modern cities and ancient rituals, national parks and legendary spirits. The country does not always choose one side. It often carries both, and perhaps nowhere is that more visible than in the communities living beside the water. For centuries, rivers and seas have shaped Thai life. Fishing villages developed along the coast. Floating markets appeared on canals. Boats became homes, workplaces, and transportation. Even today, the water remains part of everyday life. But Thailand's relationship with nature is entering a new era. Climate change is altering coastlines. Sea levels are rising. Coral reefs are under pressure. Forests are fragmented. And cities continue to expand. The question is no longer simply how Thailand survived the past. It is how Thailand will protect its future. Because the country that preserved ancient temples for centuries must now decide what parts of its natural world can survive the modern age. And the answer may determine whether the Thailand of legend still exists for the generations to come.